nanach, nachman, meuman. Nanach, nachma, meuman. We have seen that in order to wake up, we must awaken the dawn. We must rouse a good point in ourselves, which is called dawn. Shachraim, dark, shechoira, but calmly. When we use this means to rise. When we use this means to rise up from our sleep, our spiritual fall. We also awake the lyre and the harp. Through finding the good points, melodies are made, as explained in every nachman's lesson. All these ideas are implicit in the words of the Shulchan Aruch. One should strengthen himself like a lion to rise up in the early morning in the service of his Creator. This tells us that a person must force himself to wake up from his sleep, his spiritual fall. How? By awakening the dawn, by arousing his good points, which, as we have seen, embody the concept of dawn, morning. The time for this awakening corresponds to the influence of Abraham, the man of loving kindness. By inclining towards the quality of loving kindness and judging oneself on the scale of merit, a person can rouse himself from his sleep. Abraham used his leaning towards loving kindness to find good in everyone, thereby making converts and drawing the world closer to God. The words of the bezH Yosef at Yosef are immediately followed by the gloss of the rebbe, who cites the words of the psalm, I have placed God before me always. What is the connection? It means I am forever placing and setting God before my eyes, though I am distant from Him. He is before me always, in the sense that I always find a good point in myself. The same verse contains the teaching of azamra. I shall place God before me always. He is at my right hand, I will not be moved. I shall place God before me always, even if I descend to the lowest levels. God forbid, I will not be moved, because He is at my right hand. The right hand alludes to the Kabbalistic concept of the right side, embodied in the figure of Abraham and identified with the quality of loving kindness. Through this loving kindness, which implies judging favorably, I will not be moved. The night is the time of sleep. According to the Kabbalah, at night the Shekhinah extracts the sparks of holiness that have fallen under the control. The Shekhinah extracts. At night, the Shekhinah extracts the sparks of holiness that have fallen under the control of the other side. The sparks of holiness that have fallen under the control of the other side. Correspondingly, a person who finds himself overcome by sleep must search for the good points, enabling himself to wake up. Therefore King David said, I will recall my melody in the night. I meditate with my heart and my spirit. Ruach searches, one wants and searches for the good. When Ruach, the good point, through this melodies are created by strengthening ourselves to find the good point. Strengthen ourselves to find the good point. To wake up from our sleep, we attain true prayer. Discovering one's good points is the foundation of prayer, as explained in azamra. I will sing to my God how, bezH, with the little I have left, namely the good point. This teaching unfolds in the order of the morning service. We begin our prayers by reciting the chapters describing the sacrifices. We begin our prayers by reciting the chapters describing the sacrifices and incense offerings in the temple. The sacrifice and incense offerings exemplify the process of separating and selecting, elevating good points from the animal domain and from levels of utmost physicality. In particular, the sacrifices achieve an elevation from the level of animal to the level of man. The incense offering demonstrates how good can be found even in sinners. Among the ingredients that make up the incense is galbanum, a foul-smelling substance. From the fact that the incense is incomplete without this ingredient, the sages learned any communal prayer that does not include the prayer of the sinner is no prayer. Just as the burning of the incense releases the sparks of goodness Prayer, just as the burning of the incense releases the sparks of goodness, prayer is founded upon the finding of good points, even in sinners who resemble galbanum altogether. 11 ingredients comprise the incense, galbanum, and another 10 ingredients. These 10 ingredients correspond to the 10 types of melody, nachman's tikkun, that are created to find the good points, even in sinners. O my dove, trapped in the clefts of the rock, in the concealment of the cliff, show me your countenance, let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your countenance comely. When we recite the passages describing the sacrifices, it is as if we are offering the sacrifices themselves. As the sages say, when one studies the laws of the burnt offering, it is considered as if he actually brought a burnt offering, or saying the words is tantamount to bringing the offering, because the main intent of the sacrifices lies in the realm of speech. The sacrifices serve to elevate the sparks of goodness in the inanimate, vegetable and animal, in the inanimate, vegetable and animal realms, to the realm of man, whose uniqueness centers on his faculty of speech. When the good points rise up from the lowest of levels, they must be elevated to the level of speech. Nach, nachman, at first, before the good is visible, before the good is visible and separated out from the bad that covers it over. It is dumb, without the faculty of speech, as it is written, I was struck dumb, muted, I had no comfort. When the good is revealed, the essential revelation, when the good is revealed, the essential revelation and elevation that result give birth to the faculty of speech. When the good is revealed, the essential revelation and elevation that results give birth to the faculty of speech. Though my dove trapped in the clefts of the rock, in the concealment of the cliff, the good point in a person is referred to as the dove. For the dove is faithful to her mate and never abandons him. The good point that exists in each individual, even the holiest, is always attached to God, no matter where it may be. When it falls into the depths of the repressive forces, Hebrew klipos, that surround it on all sides, God says to it, show me your countenance, let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your countenance comely. Even though you are trapped in the concealment of the cliff, or you're on the lowest level, you yourself are most comely. I am black but comely, reveal yourself, God says, and show me your countenance, for your good point is always comely. Find and reveal the beauty of your good point, and through this let me hear your voice. Through revealing the good point we can speak, i.e. give thanks and praise to God, whereas before we could not speak at all. You who dwell in the gardens, companions, hearken to your voice, let me hear it. You who dwell in the gardens, companions, hearken to your voice, let me hear it. According to Rashi, dwelling in the gardens applies the state of exile amongst the nations. This alludes to the good points dwelling amongst the evil desires and shortcomings embodied amongst the good points dwelling amongst the evil desires and shortcomings embodied by the various peoples of the world. God yearns for the good points to burst into speech. Companions, hearken to your voice, let me hear it. God desires that the good points be revealed and their voices heard in song and praise to Him. The sacrificial offerings parallel the process of elevating the good points so that they will be revealed and expressed in speech. This explains why one who studies the passages dealing with the sacrifices using the faculty of speech is credited for offering those sacrifices, for the goal of the sacrifices lies in the realm of speech. Every day in the temple, when priests offered the sacrifices, and the Levites stood on their platform chanting, a deputation of Israelites stood by and recited the account of the creation and the song of Moses. Deputation of Israelites stood by and recited the account of the creation and the song of Moses, since the main intent of the sacrifices Hazinu, Deuteronomy 32. Since the main intent of the sacrifices is to find and separate out the good points from the midst of the animal impurities, it is specifically the priest who conducts these rites. The priest is the man of loving kindness, as exemplified in the person of Abraham, about whom it is written, "You shall be a priest forever, you shall be a priest forever." By inclining towards the quality of loving kindness and judging all favorably, one can find the good points even on the lowest of levels. This is the intent of the sacrifices. In this same way, melodies are made. Therefore the Levites stood on the platform, chanting and playing music. For through the revelation of good, accomplished by the priest, the man of loving kindness, melodies are created, and the deputation of Israelites that stood by engaged in Torah study represented the faculty of speech, because the intent of the sacrifices is to praise God to its consummate level, is to raise God to its consummate level, the level of speech, because the intent of the sacrifices is to raise God to its consummate level, the level of speech, to understand why the Israelite deputation first recited the account of creation. We must understand that the essence of the act of creation lay in the separating out of good. Thus we say, and in His good He renews each day constantly. The act, and in His good He renews each day constantly the act of creation, morning liturgy, and regarding each of the 6 days of creation, it is written, it was good prior to the rectification brought about by the act of creation. The Torah states the earth was formless and void, with darkness upon the face of the deep. This reflects the concept of the prevailing evil, or evil covering over the good. The rectification came about through the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. This is the Spirit of Mashiach, the very essence of goodness. Indeed, all the good points found in each Jew are sparks of Mashiach. All the good points found in each Jew are sparks of Mashiach. The world is basically sustained and built through the Spirit of God, the good Spirit, the Spirit of Mashiach. The world is basically sustained and built through the Spirit of God, the good Spirit, the Spirit of Mashiach. Through this Spirit, good points can be found, even in the midst of the formlessness and void, even in the midst of the formlessness and void. And through this, God can say, let there be light, and there was light. And God can divide between the light and the darkness. Having found the good point in himself, a person can genuinely move on to the scale of merit, and then the light is revealed, and the darkness is separated from the light, the evil from the good, and so on. Thus, the very essence of the act of creation involves the finding and separating out of the good point. We are taught that the form of the sanctuary was patterned after the form of creation. The sanctuary too was constructed from the good that is separated out from evil. Or the deputation of Israelites that stood by as the sacrifices were offered recited the account of creation, The sacrifices were an aspect of the work of creation, the separating out of good from evil. By the same token, the place for the sacrificial offerings lay in the sanctuary, and lay either the temple, for the sanctuary and temple are also constructed to the separating out of good. Thus the place of the temple is called this good mountain. Thus the place of the temple is called this good mountain. The Israelite deputation also recited the song of Moses, in which Moses promised that the Torah would never be forgotten. This song will testify for them like a witness, even in the ultimate concealment, when I will utterly hide my face. This song serves as a witness. The song conveys that even if the Jewish people are far from God, even in the ultimate concealment, nevertheless, they are still close to Him, nachman, because there are still good points in them, even in the very lowest. The song proclaims, but his nation remained God's portion. Jacob is the lot of his heritage. He found him in a desolate land, even in a desolate and formless land. His nation remained God's portion, for the good points that remain within a perverse sin constitute his portion of godliness. The Israelite deputation recited this song as the sacrifices were offered, because songs and melodies are made through the discovery of the good points even in a desolate land. Following the recitation of the chapters dealing with the sacrifices and incense offerings, comes the next section of the morning service, verses of song. First, the sacrifices bring about the separation of the good points from even the lowest levels, and then from finding the good points, melodies, the psalms are made the actual verse upon which the teaching of azamra is based. I was singing to my God with the little I have left, is part of pesukei dezeyimno. Nanach nachma nachman meuman, nanach nachman meuman. After the bezH, the morning service continues with the recitation of the Shema and the blessings that accompany it. In the first blessing, we bless God for renewing the work of creation, which He renews in His goodness each day, continually, as we have seen. Creation and the sanctuary are one common. The form of the sanctuary was patterned after the form of creation. The blessing of Yitzhak thus corresponds to the building of the sanctuary, which was constructed out of the good points of the Jewish people. In the sanctuary, prayer achieves its perfection. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, says the Lord God, who gathers in the outcasts of Israel, the building of the temple. The house of God comes about through God's gathering in the outcast of Israel. God does this by finding the good points even in the outcast, and those without hope, and gathers them into the side of holiness. Similarly, the holy temple of the future, the good mountain, will be constructed through the good, which the righteous Redeemer, the Mashiach, will gather together, because the discovery of the good points forms foundation of prayer achieves its perfection in the sanctuary, and built as it is out of the good points out of the good points. Now we can understand why the Amidah, the standing prayer, the climax of the morning service, is preceded by the recitation of the chapters dealing with the sacrifices. Then the psuke, the zimrud, and by the shema and its blessings through the passages dealing with the sacrifices. The good points are separated out. From them melodies and songs, the psuke and the zimra are made. Then we can build this sanctuary, the place of prayer. Blessings accompanying the shema, which include our blessing of God for renewing the work of creation each day continually, and which acknowledge that the form of the sanctuary was patterned after the form of creation. From the sanctuary little children receive the undefiled breath of their mouths. This correlates to the words of the Shema itself. And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall teach them to your children, speaking of them. The unification of God's name through the Shema comes about through the good points that are separated out from evil. Through this process of separation, the Holy One is united with the Shekhinah by finding the good points. Even in sinners, holiness is elevated from the very depths of the other side. The Shekhinah prides herself on these good points, as if to say, see with what a child I come to you. With the discovery of each good point, she prides herself more and more, because God's glory is exalted precisely when that which was furthest from Him draws near. This point is discussed in a number of places in Rebbe Nachman's writings. The Zohar teaches with Jethro, with Yisro, who had pursued every possible type of idolatry, came to join the Jewish people. When Jethro, who had pursued every possible type of idolatry, came to join the Jewish people, the name of God was truly glorified above and below. Precisely, when the good points that were sunken in the greatest depths are raised up and elevated. And the Shekhinah takes the greatest pride, as it were. Through there is the unification of the Holy One, and the Shekhinah takes place. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The sanctuary was there in one whole. All the good points are now well merged in the unity of God, whereupon we begin the Amidah. We start with the words, my God, open my lips and my mouth. You shall declare your praise through all the stages in the service leading up to this point. We have found the good points, made from them a sanctuary, and united the Holy One with the Shekhinah. Now we can open our mouths to speak. The ultimate ascent of good is its elevation to the level of speech. This is what we ask for now, my God. Open my lips and my mouth shall declare your praise, shall declare your praise. The first thing we do in the morning is get dressed. One should begin by holding his garments on the right hand side, in accordance with the principle that one should always endeavor to strengthen and give priority to the right side as opposed to the left, to understand the significance of this teaching. We must recall that the right side is the side of loving kindness, the quality through which we find the good points in ourselves. By finding the good points, we not only rouse ourselves from sleep, as discussed above, but we also make garments to clothe the soul, so long as the good was not yet revealed, namely during the time of sleep, the soul was naked. Among the morning blessings recited at the very beginning of the morning service, immediately after rising, is the blessing who clothes the naked, or through the revelation of good points. Garments are made, the garments of the soul. God adorns Himself, as it were, with the good points of the Jewish people, as it is written Israel in whom I will take pride, et pa'er espu'er et pa'er, through these good points, garments of beauty, pe'er and honor are made. Is referred to the tzitzis and tefillin, the clothing of the soul. The Zohar explains that the verse, for this is his only covering. It is the robe for his skin, refers to the tzitzis and tefillin. The tzitzis and tefillin are made from the good points that are separated out at night. It follows that man's garments are his clothes of beauty, and capacity of the colors are made of the good points, for the good points that compass all the colors as we saw earlier. This explains why. This explains why when dressing it is necessary to strengthen the right side. Our clothes are made of the good points which we find by inclining towards the right side, towards the quality of loving kindness, the idea of praising God for helping us find the good points. So, the idea of praising God for helping us for the good points. For helping us find the good points. The idea of praising God for helping us find the good points. Or for helping us find a good point so we can wake up from our sleep and our spiritual fall. Holier characterizes all the morning blessings. First blessing speaks of how God gives understanding to the heart to distinguish between day and night. The good point is day, and the evil which covers it over is night. And darkness in the process of finding the good point. Evil is separated from it, distinguishing it between day and night. The second blessing speaks of how God did not make me a heathen, were a person unable to find a good point in himself. He would be in danger of falling completely, to the point that he would, in effect, become a heathen accordingly. Now that he has roused and strengthened himself with God's help to find his good point, he gives thanks and praise to God because he did not make me a heathen. Later come the three blessings. He opens the eyes of the blind, he loosens those who were bound, and he strengthens those who were bent down. When a person is in a state of sleep and spiritual descent, he resembles a blind person groping in the darkness. It is as if he were imprisoned and bent down. He's able to find his good point only because God opens his eyes. Then he is released from his imprisonment. Then he is released from his imprisonment and raised upright instead of being stooped over. By finding the good point, he elevates himself from the scale of guilt onto the scale of merit and is able to return to God. All the other morning blessings refer to this theme. The last blessing is who gives strength to the weary. Even when one is overwhelmed with weariness, he can still wake up from his sleep with the strength God gives him. And this final blessing speaks of how God causes sleep to pass from my eyes and concludes by thanking God for restoring loving kindness. Through loving kindness, the good points are revealed. Nanach, nachma, meuman. According to the Medrash, God created the moon and the sun of equal size. However, the moon was jealous of the sun and complained that the heaven and the earth could not have two luminaries of equal size because the moon intruded unlawfully into the sphere of the sun. The moon is sometimes visible, sometimes invisible by day. God diminished its size, then God appeased the moon by surrounding it with stars like a viceroy, encircled by his assistants, and the enlightened will shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness will be like the stars forever. And the beginning of each month, the slender at the beginning of each month, the slender crescent of the meuman becomes visible. The moon steadily waxes until it reaches the full moon phase at the midpoint of the month. Then it begins to wane, diminishing to the point that it becomes invisible at the end of the month. Prior to the fixing of the Jewish calendar by Hillel II in 4119, 5859 CE, a new month was deemed to have begun only after the Beit Din sanctified it, based on the testimony of two reliable witnesses who had seen the new moon itself. Today we give thanks for the appearance of the new moon, the ceremony of Kiddush Levana, sanctification of the moon, which is recited upon seeing the moon clearly in the nighttime sky between the third day of its appearance and the 15th of the month. The sages say, whoever pronounces the benediction of the new moon in its due time welcomes, as it were, the presence of the Shekhinah. Nanach, nachma, meuman. Nanach, nachma, meuman. Nanach, nachma, meuman. Periods when the Jewish people are on a spiritual low level can be seen at times as times of the incomplete moon, a time when the moon stands accused. The incomplete moon is the source of all sins and blemishes. But when a Jew arouses himself and finds his good points, thereby returning to God, this corresponds to the restoration of the moon from its blemish. Then the sanctification of the moon can take place. At the beginning of the month, when we look for the moon, in order to sanctify it, the moon appears very small and find a mere point. This is the good point, which is black but comely. When the moon reaches its ultimate diminution, when the moon reaches its ultimate diminution at the end of the month, it is necessary for the entire Jewish people to search for it until two witnesses can testify it to having seen a small point of the new moon. Then the Beit Din proclaims the new month and the moon is restored. This process parallels the manner in which the good point that we succeed in finding in ourselves, no matter how infinitesimally small it may be, no matter how infinitesimally small it may be, raises us from the scale of guilt onto the scale of merit. After receiving testimony from the witnesses who spotted the moon, the bezH, and all the people would proclaim sanctified. Similarly, when we find even a small good point, we become sanctified by judging ourselves and others favorably. The moon was diminished in size because of its complaint words, namely, the proclamation of sanctified, elevate the moon from its blemish. The sanctification of the moon depends on the single point of light that was seen. After God diminished the size of the moon, He gave it the stars as a consolation. The stars allude to the good points found in all Jews, through which they can move onto the scale of merit by being judged favorably. It is written, those who turn the many to righteousness will be like the stars forever. Those who turn the many to righteousness are the tzaddikim of each generation, who judge all favorably. Because of this, even the sinners move onto the scale of merit like the stars forever, because the stars are the good points. Later in the same passage, it is written, many will be purified, whitened, and refined, while the wicked will do wickedly and not understand. Then the enlightened will shine, and those who turn the many to righteousness will be like the stars forever. This refers to the era of the Mashiach, the end of days, when the forces of evil will attack most powerfully, as we find in the statements of the sages. At the time, a great process of selection and refinement will take place. Many will be purified, whitened, and refined. The main rectification will be brought about by turning the many to righteousness. Or the most important spiritual work of the tzaddikim will be to judge everyone favorably, finding the good points of even the very lowly. Through this process, the final redemption will take place with the coming of Mashiach. King David says, praise him, all you stars of light, to the light-giving stars, the good points we are able to give. Thanks and praise to God. I shall sing to my God with a little bit I have left. Thus the moon was given the stars as a consolation. The stars, the good points, serve to rectify the blemishes of the moon. A person who wishes to rise early to plead before his Creator should aspire to pray at the times when the night watches change. For at those hours, one's prayers over the destruction of the temple and the exile are especially accepted. This teaching refers to taking chatzos, or the midnight laments, which is found in complete editions of the prayer book. The time for taking chatzos is the middle of the night, regardless of whether the nights are short or long. Only did King David know the exact time. Nach is exactly 6 hours at the beginning of the night. Did King David, 6 hours regardless of long or night, exactly 6 hours after the beginning of the night. Did King David know the exact time of midnight? Even our teachers Moses did not know it, for it is written about midnight. About midnight I will go out into the land, into the midst of Egypt. Why about midnight? Can there be any doubt in the mind of heaven? We must therefore say that God told Moses at midnight, and Moses came and said, about midnight. Hence Moses was in doubt. Can David have known it then? David had a sign, a harp hung above David's bed. As soon as midnight arrived, a north wind came and blew upon it, and the harp played it by itself. David rose immediately and began studying Torah until daybreak. To rise up at midnight for taking chatzos, we must break the heaviness of sleep. We do this by finding the good points, as we saw earlier in connection with the verse, awake my glory, awake the lyre and the harp. The harp is King David's harp, which was played by the north wind, the good wind, or good spirit, namely the good point. The Hebrew word for north, sahafon, carries the connotations of hidden and concealed. The good point is concealed in the depths of sleep, yet it exists even in the least worthy of people. How great is your kindness, i.e. the good point, which we have kept hidden. Sofanta, for those who fear you, these good points blew on King David's harp, making melodies. Thus his harp played by itself, and in the same way we can awaken at midnight from the heaviness of sleep. The exodus from Egypt, the exodus of Egypt the exit from Egypt also took place at midnight. After God informed Moses of the upcoming exodus, he commanded the Jewish people to sanctify the new moon. This was the very first commandment given to the Jewish people as they prepared to leave Egypt. The redemption from Egypt came about because of the remaining good points of all the Jews in Egypt. They had become blemished and had fallen to the 49th level of impurity, as it is written, and I passed over you, and I saw you weltering in your own blood. Nevertheless, God had pity on them and found their good points, even in the depths of the Egyptian defilement that had overcome them. I said to you, in your blood live, in your blood live, even amidst the overwhelming blood and filth. Despite it, God said, live. For even there, it is possible to find the good points. Now we can understand why the very first commandment given to the Jewish nation was the sanctification of the moon, the sighting of even the smallest portion of the new moon, a modicum of good is sufficient to proclaim the new month. Finding the modicum of good brought about the Egyptian redemption, and in the future the same process will characterize the final redemption when Israel's exiled. He will be gathered in from the nations of the world. Moses said to Paro in God's name, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt. At midnight, nach, the good point is aroused, and therefore the north wind blew at that time upon King David's harp. The good wind, the good point, emanates specifically from the north wind. The north wind is the place of evil, as it is written, out of the noble war the evil will break forth. When the good comes out of the very depths of evil, its greatness is most apparent. The best way to perceive light is in contrast to the darkness. At midnight, the Shekhinah is at its diminution, as it were. It is no longer than a small point. Sleep is at its heaviest. It is no larger. Is at its diminution. The Shekhinah at midnight. The Shekhinah is at its diminution, as it were. It is no larger than a small point. Sleep is at its heaviest at that time. All those whose hearts have been touched by the fear of heaven must awaken and overcome the sleep. They do this with only a little bit of good to rely upon. This awakening parallels the exodus from Egypt. God took pity on the Jews and passed over their houses when he brought the plague of the firstborn over the Egyptians. In his mercy, the Holy One gathered all the good points of the Jews. The very concept of Israel alludes to the good points. Therefore God called the Jewish people, my son, my firstborn Israel. On the night of Pesach, Israel was separated out from the firstborn of the Egyptians and redeemed from the forces of the other side. The first to reveal the secret power of midnight was Abraham. Abraham went to war against the four kings to rescue his nephew Lot from captivity. When Abraham went to battle, he divided the night against them. He divided the night against them, breaking the heaviness of sleep and splitting the darkness of night with the good point can be accomplished only through the quality of loving kindness embodied in Abraham, who always inclined towards the attribute of love. Abraham pursued the kings to save Lot because of the good point Lot possessed. Lot himself was wicked, yet Abraham risked his life to save him because Ruth was destined to be descended from Lot. Therein lay Lot's good point. Ruth was the ancestor of King David and the Mashiach, who is the very root and essence of the good point. The four kings really wanted to kill Lot. The repressive forces always seek to overpower the good point, but God does not abandon it to their hands. He gave enough strength to the power of love embodied in Abraham to save Lot through Lot's good point. Therefore Abraham was able to overcome these mighty kings by judging favorably and finding the good points. Even in the wicked, evil can be subdued. It only takes a little good to banish it. To banish evil, it only takes a little good to banish evil. The Talmud records a difference of opinion among the rabbis regarding the ability to determine the exact moment of midnight. The Talmud asks, did King David know the exact time of midnight? Even our teacher Moses did not know it, for it is written about midnight, I will go out into the midst of Egypt. About midnight I will go out I will go out into the midst of Egypt. This seems to imply that David was not able to determine the exact moment. Comes the answer, a harp hung above David's bed. As soon as midnight arrived, a north wind came and blew upon it, and the harp played by itself. David arose immediately and began studying Torah until daybreak. Underlying this discussion is a theme that reaches the summit of Jewish destiny. Underlying this discussion is a theme that reaches the summit of Jewish destiny, the redemption of the Jewish people as a whole, and the personal redemption of each and every Jew. The essence of redemption depends on the skill of being able to determine the exact point of midnight. The essence of redemption depends on the skill of being able to determine the exact point of midnight, or when the heaviness of sleep overtakes a Jewish soul, it threatens to overcome him completely. God forbid, due to his many sins and shortcomings, he is in danger of falling completely. But at precisely that moment, God in his mercy enlightens him, causing him to remember his good points and revive himself. Rising at midnight demonstrates this redemptive process in action. At midnight, the Shechina, the embodiment of all the Jewish souls, is at her lowest, most minuscule point. Bitterly she cries out to God, like the heart pants for brooks of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. Included in the liturgy, Psalm 42:2, including in the liturgy of Tikkun Chatzois, Tigaleo, a voice is heard on high, a lamentation and bitter weeping, a voice is heard on high, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, a voice is heard on high, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. Also included in the liturgy of Tikkun Chatzois, that God arouses his mercy and extends a thread of loving kindness towards her. And God arouses his mercy and extends a thread of loving kindness towards her. The same thing happens to each and every Jew all the time. A Jew is constantly threatened. A Jew is constantly threatened by sleep until he is on the verge of stumbling. This is the moment at which he must look for his good point. As we saw earlier, if I said my foot is slipping, your loving kindness would sustain me. If I said my foot is slipping, if I said my foot is sleeping, your loving kindness would sustain me. When my cares within me are many, your comforts cheer my soul. This is the teaching of azamra. When a person reaches the ultimate in constricted consciousness, when he wants to say my foot is slipping, at that moment God's love holds him up, rousing him from his sleep and supporting him. This is literally getting up at midnight, which is the time of extreme constriction. At precisely this moment, one must arouse himself from sleep, rising from his foul through the teaching of azamra. I will sing to my God with the little I have left. Both the general and personal redemptions depend on this. And so we find that the first redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt took place at midnight. Similarly, the final redemption, which we hope will come speedily in our days, will also come about in the merits of midnight, the Tikkun Chatzois, the midnight lament, for which truly righteous and God-fearing individuals rise up each night, drawing upon themselves the holiness of midnight, and drawing upon themselves, drawing upon themselves. Drawing upon themselves, drawing upon themselves, drawing upon themselves, drawing upon themselves. Nach, nachman, meuman. Nanach, nachman, meuman, nanach, nachman, meuman. nanach, nachman, meuman, nanach, meuman, nanach, nachman, meuman, nanach, nachman, meuman.